multiply their drink offerings of blood, I will not pour out, nor do what? Take their names on my lips. And so according to David, what this means to take another God's name on your lips, it means that you're running after them in some way. You're looking to them in some way. Or to put it another way, the way that Jesus said it in the New Testament, what comes out of our mouth, where does it come from? Our hearts. And so the fact that another God's name would be on my lips would mean that they have a place in my heart. Does that make sense? And so God is telling his people basically this, is that this is not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to give your allegiance or affections to any other gods. I'm to reign supreme alone over your heart and over your life. And one of the ways that it will be manifested or clear that this is happening in the life of an Israelite is they're going to keep these Sabbath days and festivals, right? In other words, if they do this stuff, it's going to become really clear who's in charge of their calendars and their resources, right? That his word governs their time and the use of their resources. Let's look at those one at a time. These Sabbath years and Sabbath days mentioned in verse 10 through 12. Do y'all remember what commandment that would have to do with? Pop quiz. How many of you think it's commandment number 1? Good, don't raise your hand. Oh, Cannon, come on, man. Commandment number 3? 4? That's the one I think it is. 5? How many of you think it's 4 again? Okay, yeah, there you go. It's commandment number 4. So we're expanding the 4th commandment here. Now, it's not totally clear what it meant to let the land lie for like a year. Did it mean like nobody farms anywhere, or did it mean you kind of rotated your crops so that every 7 years, one piece of ground got the year off? But every 7 years, supposed to let the ground lay fallow. Every 7 days, they were supposed to rest a day. And what's going on here is this expression, at least if you're an Israelite, that I'm depending upon God for my provision, not what I can get done in all 7 days. Does that make sense? We saw that in the 4th commandment. And let me just say, if you are laying off the farm for a year, you've really got to trust God, right? You have to be trusting that in those 6 years coming up to it, he provided for you, and you got to be a good steward of what God gives you in those 6 years, right? But to say, I'm going to give a whole year and not try to reap the produce of this land, you've really got to trust God. And so what this makes it really clear is that these Israelites, their hearts are fixed on God. They're trusting him. They're living for him. His name is on their lips, and they're doing what he says. Does that make sense? We'll come back to that in a moment. But also notice this is another opportunity for God's people to extend his compassion to the poor, the slave, the immigrant. And this is interesting for us. I think even wild and domestic animals, God cares about them and wants his people to care about them. I don't know how often you think about this, but if you start in creation and you kind of just come through the Bible, there's this really big idea that as God's image bearers, part of our dominion over the earth is that we actually care about it and take care of it and steward its resources well and care for its creatures. And this is showing up here in the law. In verses 14 to 19, there are these 3 festivals mentioned, and here's what they all have in common. They're all an annual pilgrimage that Israelite men were supposed to make. And the 3 that we have here, we get other details about them in the rest of the Bible, but I'm going to fly through them. First is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is the feast that happened right after the Passover every year. It was the first one that kind of came in Israel early in their calendar year. It would be springtime for us. But basically, right after the Passover, they had to eat for 7 days, nothing with leaven in it. They actually had to get it all out of their house, sweep it all out. And the reason is because when they left Egypt, they had to leave in such a hurry that their bread didn't have time to do what?